Says we're
Okay,
live.
now we're live. Okay, well,
Yeah.
a good day, good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. This is New World Chaos. I'm Jeff, and this is Nemo.
Hello, hello. I'm here and I'm feeling alive and a little crazy. I like that. I really feel like I fit the theme of our show, at least the name. Maybe it's a winner. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. But yeah, we don't really have a guest today. Sometimes we just can't find a person in time, and we just enjoy the randomness and the mystery of whatever we discover. And something that's inspiring me lately that is like a continuation of some of the things we've been talking about. Um, at some point a couple of months ago, I came up with this phrase, like this really kind of unusual way of describing a phenomenon that I'm trying to grasp at in my writing and my research. It's very philosophical. Um, and so we on this show we talk a lot about childhood sheltering and how it's really damaging. You know, just the boy in the bubble wrapping your kids, and they don't get to experience kind of rough and tumble play, et cetera, et cetera. And how one of my theories or hypotheses is that childhood sheltering is one of the main causes of social justice and a lot of the mental health crisis we see, and on and on. And I wanted to try to characterize that more specifically so people can start to imagine what I'm talking about. And I see it as people are trying to avoid the wilderness of life. That's a phrase I've used recently, and I've been writing about that. The wilderness of life. It's like we are weirdly disconnected from nature. And that I was writing about how it just gets almost creepy. It's like we actually have been living in the Matrix, modern manufactured world, but people just don't see it that way. That everything we have is built out of things in nature. But I just, as a youth mentor, see so many people going to so extreme lengths and using so many resources and so much money just to build this fake world on top of the natural world for their kids. And that's where I'm at right now. It seems really alien, but I'm just noticing it's almost like we've domesticated ourselves. Yeah, I don't know. Does that make any sense, Jeff? Like based on what we've talked about before?
um, yeah, I think it makes sense. Um, I missed the part where it was tied to the wokeness, or did you bring that in?
Oh, I didn't want to it's like I don't want to be redundant, but we maybe have new people that show up or listen to the show whenever, but we've talked about that before. We kind of think childhood sheltering is a cause of social justice. And like if I want to get into the archetypes of this, I really want to remind a lot of people that social justice as we know it, some of the topics, the hot button issues, to some degree, they seem like distractions to me. And if you want to get into like the heart of it, it really seems like it's this existential reaction that a lot of people have because they were bubble wrapped. And then all of a sudden, at some point in childhood or as a young adult, they discover the wilderness and unpredictability and chaos and disasters in the world, kind of like how Jordan Peterson talks. And they get disturbed and then they just want to eradicate it. That's kind of what it looks like to me as an observer. I don't know. Me and you, we come from like unusual perspectives. So it's almost like we have to constantly observe from the outside.
Mhm. Yes, it does seem like that.
I don't know if you had any experiences where you feel like you had a breakthrough in kind of empathizing or a creative new way of understanding the situation at all, or is it just kind of feel like we're stuck at times?
You mean with the social justice or just in general?
Um, I guess social justice or just like any person that's like really afraid of risk. You know, they have a different personality than us. Like people that you try to counsel that just don't seem ready for empowerment. Have you had any experiences that help you kind of understand their perspective or
No, I mean I grew up around religious people my whole life, so there's a little bit of similarity there I can relate to. My biggest the biggest issue for me right now in relation to all of it is it's like navigating in around in a fog. I don't know I don't know if I'm in the minority. I don't know how big the minority is or how small it is. I don't know if they're in the minority. I don't know. I struggle enough with that as it is on an individual level, but like culturally or socially, I can't position myself. I know what makes sense to me and what doesn't, and a lot of the woke stuff just does not make sense. So just logically and intellectually, I can't. Uh, I can't take it seriously and play along with it. But socially and politically, and like when I was a Democrat or a classical liberal, I pretty much knew where I stood with the people around me, even depending on where I was geographically. I could position myself, and now I don't know where I am. I'm politically wandering, homeless. I don't know how big my tribe is, how small it is. I don't know who it is anymore. It's just this fog around, like and it's all seems to be in relation to the social justice movement, or that the social justice movement possibly slash COVID was a catalyst for the current situation or the current feeling.
Yeah, yeah, it kind of seems like, as I guess to some degree, the events of 2020 were very surprising and just out of left field. Like there was some kind of explosion almost. But the more this continues on, the more it makes sense to me that that explosion was inevitable. That and a lot of those issues, it's like now they're just more apparent, they're more obvious, and they're transparent on the surface. So for me, with some of the research I've been doing, and economics and, well, I guess a little bit culture, coincidentally, through some of my youth work, it all kind of starts to make sense. It's like you get blindsided by a lightning strike, and then you start to realize you're in a storm. And when you say you feel like it's in a fog and you're politically homeless, I've never felt like I politically connect with the vast majority of people around me because I don't really, the only political involvement I ever had was when I was anarchistic and didn't want anything to do with the government. And I'm kind of changing in some ways, I guess, but I think I even became anarchistic when I was younger as a reaction, partially, to how hyper political people were around me because I'm from the Twin Cities in Minnesota, and in the cities here, it's like people are just so politically active in this very god awful way. And the people that I was looking for that were socially active in community, let's freaking have a community garden. Let's have a music jam session. Let's build something, whatever. That group strongly overlapped with the hyper political group. And because of that, it was like those people had a hard time separating those two worlds. And I hated it when people would do this, and they still do this. A lot of left wing, kind of hardcore left wing people will say everything is political. That drives me nuts. It's like politics is the blob and it's trying to take over my world. I'm like, grilled cheese is not political. Chihuahuas are not political. Okay, I can list thousands of random things that I fundamentally believe are not political. The only thing political about dogs is when I was in elementary school, it was dogs versus cats. Oh no, the end of the world. And it's like those were our teams, like sports teams. But
Oh,
the invasion of politics combined with the vagueness of it and feeling like we're in no man's land is a really disorienting experience. It's like now you're being pressured and demanded to state your beliefs and pick a side and all this whatever, but there's no group that makes sense.
it's a new place for me. I've not really been here before, so it's this sort of. I feel like the new kid at school. Like you move to a maybe a much bigger school, or and it's, I don't know. I'm still finding my place. Like I said, I don't know where this is going.
Yeah.
Hopefully, though, the thing that does encourage me and keeps me in it is the one thing I do feel confident about that I know pretty well is communities. And the community that I see growing from this is really impressive to me. It seems very healthy, very functional. Um, it does seem to be more centered around self determination and those values. So I think that's one of the big things that keeps me like invested in this, despite the unfamiliarity of it to me.
Yeah. Isn't it is kind of remarkable how, like I just described this, it was this sensation of hyper politicization and it being very vague. And by direct contrast, anyone we interact with in our little forming sphere regularly in Counterweight and CTA, say with Neil, shout out to Neil, he's on the show next week. Anyone we interact with, I feel like this real strong sense that they're very articulate, they're very clear, they bring a clarity to any conversation we have, and they're very passionate, they're very pro autonomy. It's like in the wreckage of these storms, there is a more legitimate and authentic counter culture forming. Like there's this like filler, okay, mediocre, I mean, kind of mediocre substitute counterculture for a lot of the development of like social justice, or it's like left wing versus what, conservatism, American conservatism. I don't really fit in American conservatism. Maybe a little bit culturally, like I can coexist pretty decently, but that's not a very well defined umbrella for a lot of people that are that are detaching from social justice. And in Counterweight, I do see, and in CTA, I see a lot of people that are forming a counter movement or counterculture that is much clearer and it's really strong. Like there's a foundation here. It's like we're still in this fog, but we have a potential foundation right before us that could be just incredible. I just feel like I'm spinning my wheels in the mud, trying to find that perfect life hack to rally the troops and get people together. But
I don't know. I don't know how big it is, the counter movement. If
I
there
think
is
the
one, and how
counter
big?
movement's
I don't
big.
know how big wokeness is either, because I think it gets magnified and distorted through headlines and social media too.
Mhm.
So I don't have a real way to take a measurement of either side.
Yeah, that would be pretty tough. A couple of people in Counterweight got really enthusiastic about doing a survey, and I had tried to do that earlier, and nobody really responded to my survey, and I didn't really try too hard after they stopped replying. But whatever, that happens all the time. People just stop, their interest fades, they don't do anything.
Oh,
But
yeah.
very recently, there are a couple of people really into making a survey. I tried to support them, trying to get so that we can actually start seeing what, quantify some of these experiences and see what are people's experiences kind of all over the place. And so, to be determined there. This survey was a little bit different than what I would want to do. They were focusing on people specifically that are ex-woke is how they label it. So they used to be really into social justice, and now become disillusioned. But related to that, like some of the vagueness in what are people's actual experiences day to day in their personal lives. I had a conversation a while ago with a close friend of mine, and we were noticing that with the lockdowns in our area with COVID, Minnesota definitely has restrictions continuing on. I don't think we're necessarily the worst state or in like the top 3 or 5, but we definitely have a lot of the areas where things are really restricted and have been for over a year now. And this friend of mine was saying that if people aren't visually seeing each other's experiences in your apartments, you go visit a friend's house, you work together, and you're not physically in the same location. It's like you don't even get to see what people are actually experiencing, and your world suddenly becomes very small. And I'm very concerned because I can see the effect of this, that a lot of people are very careless and callous, that they just don't realize things like domestic violence, suicide attempts, um, child abuse relating to those issues, mental illness, crises are all skyrocketing since these lockdowns. So it's like people are so disconnected from each other in such a literal, geographical, physical way. It's like you could be right next door to your neighbors and people just, it's like they're in different worlds. It makes it so vague, and then people lack empathy because they're oblivious. So it makes me really, and the other flip side of that disaster, it makes me extremely grateful that me and you have our little hub that we're growing, even if it's mostly virtual. Because at least, like, being international, we get to see how people react to each other that are from all over the world and see what we have in common and what we know about places, and it really helps. And I want people to be exposed to more people in more places.
Well, speaking of that, we don't really have a guest today. So if there's anybody watching or anybody on social media that wants to interact, we have the comments open on YouTube. You can ask questions. If you want the Zoom link, you can be on the show with us today if you want, and we can get a conversation going. So today's kind of open, and I wanted to offer that opportunity for anyone out there that wants it, because one of the purposes of this podcast is to build community. So we want to find more ways to tie that into the weekly podcast that we've been doing.
Yes. Yes.
Also, you can email us at jeffandnemo@gmail.com to get the link.
Yeah. Yeah, we do have some pockets where people are really active and they're just so cool to interact with. So even though at times it feels like it's slow going, I've been really getting into focusing on the rarity of each person. It's like a philosophical thing that we could almost assume through deductive reasoning that you are the only time you've ever happened as this particular person in this particular time and place. So it's like literally as rare as it possibly can be. So even if sometimes we feel like we don't have almost anybody, if we got each other and we got maybe one other person and we got one experience, it's a very special thing. And I have been a little disconnected from CTA, one of our groups, Critical Therapy Antidote, that we're connected to, because I've just been so busy. But I have some time opening up and I'm going to get reconnected. And every time I've interacted with CTA members, a lot of them are really into the psychology world. It's just been nothing but a joy. And some of the things they say are so insightful and creative. And it just helps me imagine, like, screw utopia. I don't care about utopia. What we imagine when we're really in those beautiful moments is like this mystical, crazy land in this forest, and you can just dive into an adventure and get screwed up and then help each other out and get messed up again and then get back on your feet and build something amazing and become a strong person. And like, that is what's really exciting me. It's just, if I can imagine that vision and more tangibly, I can almost taste it. But
yeah, I think it's happening. Or I think it needs to happen more, but I see little signs of it happening.
Yeah. Well, yeah, me and you are probably just always going to be in the extreme ends when it comes to being proactive and passionate, and probably a little crazy.
I don't think I'm that crazy.
Well, I mean, I kind of meant it as a casual, maybe even a compliment. Some people take it as a compliment when you say crazy.
Oh, I don't care. People have thought I was crazy my whole life, so they can think.
Same.
It doesn't bother me if people think I'm crazy. Put it that way.
Yeah. It's yeah, so I think well you told me once about in one of our meetings about this concept, and I guess it's also an organization embracing what was embracing how extreme dang it, now I forgot the word. Extremism. No, that's not good. Or embracing intensity, is that it? Embracing
Oh
intensity?
yeah. Mhm.
And I
Yeah,
looked at the
that's
website once and it was seemed really cool and because you recommended it to me, but I mean if you I like the title implies, you embrace intensity of passion and creativity, and I guess it's almost like they consider it a personality trait.
yeah. I'd say that's accurate. And finding environments that can sustain that and be supportive of
Yeah.
that. And that's why with the environments I try to create and communities I try to create, I build that into those from the start. Because if I'm gonna be able to, if I need to be able to be part of them, they're gonna have to be able to sustain my intensity. So I've learned how to have settings and environments support intensity to the extent that I can.
Yeah, that
And
makes
a lot of
sense.
it depends on the community too and the group and what their goals are.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't noticed anything that stands out to me where I'm like, oh, Jeff is taking this action or he's responding in this way that makes a nice environment for embracing intensity. But it
Okay.
seems like me and you tend to jive naturally anyways, or we vibe and connect anyways. And I can definitely be an intense person. If I'm in my best state of being, I could easily literally just get high on life, high on my own supply, as Wim Hof says. Like there are times recently where I was just so excited and just having a great time. And I felt like I was in a different state of being. And my couple of friends and roommates were just like, Jack, are you high on something? Oh, Jack's my real name, by the way, but Nemo, are you high on something? And I'm just like, I might as well be. Maybe my own brain is producing it. But some people, I can see how it'd be too much for them. They don't know how to manage it, I guess. And also, I think there's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy with it for some people where they want to try and manage it instead of just relaxing and going with the flow or being maybe open to that natural flow and unpredictability and the chaos of being in a creative place. Sometimes people just get a little bit controlling and it's too much for them because they're trying to box it in. And then they just end up being kind of miserable and it's almost like they're misusing that energy and it tortures them.
Well, it'd be interesting to find out. That's one thing I try to do is make sure that people I'm working with have some kind of creative outlet for that energy, at least, because I know what it's like even with me when it builds up.
Yes. Yes, indeed. That's one of the reasons I don't like working full time. I don't need to work full time in most cases. I save money, I'm frugal, I'm a single person. Um, I rent a room out of a house. It's like, yeah, but every time I work full time, I get to that stage where I start to like live my work day. The clock is counting down, and I'm just like get more and more angry that I'm not creating something like music or working on some crazy research project, which feels creative to me. Or just, and if it gets too wacky, then I just end up doing something totally random. Like this last office job I was doing, I did it full time temporary, and I ended up starting to collect all the colorful paper clips and organize them into little rainbows. I'm just like, this
Wow.
is where I'm at. This is the level I've got to. I need to not go full time anymore at this stage because all of my creative energy is going into paper clips. I had one handy.
Yeah.
But you got to use that energy.
I agree. That's uh, um I lost the thought. It'll come back. It was about something about COVID the last year, and something in it
Oh, sure.
taught me that I wanted to add on to that, but have to wait for it to come back.
Yeah. Well, maybe I can jog your memory a little bit or something, but I do remember when you talk about COVID and being like indoors a lot or limited places to go out, you seem to have adapted pretty well. And it sounds like because of the social justice being in Seattle, you're just not even that motivated to go to social places and that much.
No, I'm really not. Like today is May Day, I think, and they're supposed to have May Day is big here. They have protests every year. They wear black. I don't know what you call the anarchs or some the
Oh,
May Day protest, and they smash up windows and break things. So May Day is always kind of it's not a holiday here. It's always a tense day of what's going to happen and how bad is it going to be here. And so today is May Day, and a lot of people stay inside to avoid that. And it's been really ever since last summer when everyone broke quarantine and started protesting, and then the East Precinct that they ran off everybody there, and the Chaz developed around there. So ever since really last summer, it's kind of been unpredictable when you leave your house as to what you're going to encounter, or what's going to go on, or what you have to face. And I don't know where I was going with this or what started it, but
yeah. Well, I asked you a little bit about it. Yeah, being in Seattle, and you just seem like you've had a lot of your motivation is more towards some of the online community building because of the issues in Seattle, and
oh
I
yeah.
can definitely understand that. Um, the group you're talking, or the kind of loosely defined movement group you're talking about that wears all black, usually those groups either identify as Antifa, Black Bloc, or a combination of both. And as of 2020, there's been a really big overlap between them and BLM groups. So now there's these groups that are like Antifa BLM in combination, which I think was already relatively common, but now it's like getting more, it's becoming more of a strong pattern. And that's been my experience in that it's almost like there's like before 2020 George Floyd stuff, uh, those groups didn't overlap as strongly as they do now in a very conscious way, in my experience in the Twin Cities and like online. But I've met a lot of people who are at least sympathetic to Antifa or Black Bloc. I've had friends that were connected to that. And it's really a weird thing when it comes to navigating the confusing political nature of it because I've met people that aren't as woke social justice, but they are very tied into like this Black Bloc kind of anarchistic. I hate calling it anarchy too, because they tend towards violence and smashy smashy, like they want to play life as a game of whack-a-mole. And I guess that's something that self-described anarchists do, but there's other self-described anarchists that are like the total opposite of that, and they just want to be pro-autonomy and completely anti-authoritarian, including anti-government. Anyways, I've had friends that were all Black Bloc Antifa that were almost entirely unwoke, but they weren't particularly anti-woke, and they had like one toe in it. So we were able to maintain a friendship for a while, but eventually it just didn't work as per usual. And some of the things that they would want to do is like, we're going to take hostage this luxury apartment building in Minneapolis by Dinkytown, that's the neighborhood where the University of Minnesota is. That's like their hub. So it's literally called Dinkytown. It feels like a mini city. It's all college students. And there's all these luxury buildings that are like trying to rent to college students that don't know much about money or whatever. And most of them are empty because there's too many of them and they're expensive and nobody wants them. And so now there's Black Bloc and there's my friends, and they're like imagining themselves going full Black Bloc, and they want to take over these empty luxury complex and be squatters. And they're like, you should join us. I'm just like, I don't want to do that. And it's just this weird thing. Everything's weird. It's freaking Yeah, because I'm anti-authoritarian and I certainly don't like the government. There are plenty of times where I get in weird situations where people seem to interpret that I must be kind of a little bit social justice like and sort of an Antifa revolutionary. It's very weird. I don't get it. I've probably said weird like 30 times the last 2 minutes. Nothing makes sense. That's my conclusion.
No, I think a lot of people are feeling that, and that's how we're finding each other. Um, this people have said this over and over in some of these groups, but I don't feel like I've changed, or they don't feel like they've changed. They feel like their party has changed, or their group has changed, or the ground has changed underneath them. And I kind of feel the same way. I don't feel like my values are much different than they've always been. But there's some kind of realignment going politically or socially with all the groups around me that's changing. And that's causing my politics to appear to have changed when they haven't.
Yeah. Yep. I could definitely see that for anybody that is in a kind of liberal or progressive culture. And we've been talking on Counterweight, trying to articulate and define some of these cultural trends better. And I think there's this quasi vaguely liberal cultural trend. It's this weird thing that I think is almost inevitably vague by design. And you can almost define it as over time, it's the transition in the Overton window for new things that arise that are kind of countercultural. And I guess they're perceived as somewhat left wing, progressive. And as they become more mainstream, they become more quasi conservative. They move away from progressive towards liberal, conservative ish. But people don't always shift their Overton window, or they don't even realize that's happening. So there's all these things. So there's like this weird cultural trend where some kind of poorly defined liberal progressivism is basically mainstream and dominant. And it's just it's just like it's the vagueness of it, the apathy, the lack of thinking and creativity or contemplation. Just seems like a lot of people around me and others I've met on Counterweight, we just know so many people around us that just kind of flounder around and they don't bother to figure that stuff out. They're running on assumptions, built on more assumptions. Oh, everyone must be liberal around here. We're in a major city. Well, what does that mean? Um, it's a mess. Like it's like, yeah, it's a researcher's nightmare if they want to do a survey. They shouldn't ask people things. If you want to do a survey politically, I don't even know if you should use the word liberal at all. And it's just mind blowing. Like one of the weird things I discovered as far as people's differing perception is I met people after the 2020 election and so now Joe Biden's our president and all that, hurrah, hurrah, who thought that if they voted for Joe Biden, it would stop the riots. And I'm just like, okay, you clearly have no experience with the people that are doing the riots or even tangentially tied to them, because those people do not like politicians like Joe Biden whatsoever. Most of the time. I think there's like maybe a small overlap. But anyways, I don't know. There's a lot of misconstrued misunderstandings.
There's some black blockers outside my window.
Oh, lovely. We're getting a live show.
Yeah.
We're both wearing black. Let's hope we don't.
They're hooded, they're blacked. There are about 10 of them clumped together.
Jeez. Do you think they're doing anything?
It looks like they either just came back, because I live on one of the main routes. I live near one of the main routes that they like to use for their protests. So it looks like they either are just walking back from one or maybe taking a break or something.
Yeah. Geez, me and you both live like front row audience seats for different parts of the craziness.
It was if I didn't enjoy it. It was not. It's not fun.
Yeah.
I'm ready for a different view.
Yeah, same. I'm very black pilled about the Twin Cities. There were a couple of things I definitely like really enjoyed in the most ridiculous way. Most of it has been these terrible experiences, but I've dealt with it all my life. So I just don't, I'm in some ways I'm too used to this stuff, but I'm kind of black pilled and jaded at times. One aspect of this that was bizarrely enjoyable for me and my personality type was really early on, like the first 10 days of the George Floyd stuff in Minneapolis. I was on the streets. I still had my youth job, which was mobile outreach for at-risk youth and homeless issues. And so I was just on the streets. I was on Lake Street. I was on Chicago, and that's where all of the epicenter of this stuff was happening. I was at the George Floyd Memorial site when the National Guard was like everywhere and threatening people. But the memorial site in the early days just felt so peaceful and like a freaking LSD fever dream. It didn't even feel like it was political. I mean, I'm sure for some people it was, but it was so ridiculous. It's like you get a concussion and you got the birds flying around your head as a cartoon. You can't articulate it as political yet, but it felt in some way, it felt amazing. Even though there was also like, I wouldn't want people to go around destroying things and do a Chaz every major city, but certain aspects of it felt like we were just having a big block party. It literally felt like a big block party because there were not almost any riots during those times. It was like mainly just the third precinct being burned. And I wasn't there for that. But just hanging out there, there was somebody that put up a stage in the Target parking lot on Lake Street, and people could just go up and talk and then like play music. So if we could extract the amazingness of those experiences and the spontaneity and people's passion and we're just going to go be creative and start this stuff no matter what, that's what I want to see. That's what felt so amazing. And I'm sure there are people that are sympathetic to social justice who were like high on that excitement, who are just desperate to maintain it. And that's probably why they're still attached to this movement.
I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. Do you remember anything you were going to say about COVID last year?
Oh, no, I don't.
Yeah, it was a while ago. I was hoping maybe I could catch it, but
It was something about everything you said about the things you've learned, and most of mine were overlapping except for this last year because of COVID. I learned some other things, or it shifted what you were saying for me in a different direction, and it was something related to that. But
yeah.
It may not come back.
Oh well, such is life. It's spontaneous. I get really amused at how easily most people seem to assume that life can be predictable, like even more than like 5%.
I don't even know how they plan their day. I never know what my days. I'm serious. I don't ever know how to plan a day. People that can plan stuff for like months or years out, like a vacation or a construction project, that just blows my mind that they can time everything that far into the future.
Yeah. It is incredible. And that type of like planning things versus utter chaos, that experience, that tug of war has been my life very intensely the last like 3.5 days. And that's because, as I told you, and now I'll tell our imaginary audience, I won a camper van in an auction very spontaneously for a ridiculously good deal. I basically got it for like a quarter of its going value if you just bought it on sale. And it's hard to price those things because it's a niche market, but it's getting really popular. So it's so disorienting. There are times where I feel like I'm living in two worlds at the same time, where here's your prices in this world and here's your prices in the other world. And I I won it, and I was still working this full-time job. My last day was Friday, and I won it during work, and my phone's in my pocket, and I just hear beep 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 ding 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 ding, and then I open it and scroll, and my friend is sending me like a billion Kermit the Frog dancing gifts because I won it. And then I just have to scramble around because this thing's in Georgia and I'm in Minnesota. So it's just like I got to figure out how to get it, how to afford it, and not totally screw up my life, which I surprisingly was possible. And now we got to go get this thing, and we're going to drive across the country, and maybe we'll see some riots along our route, and we'll just go on a nice little tour. Probably not. I haven't heard too many. I haven't heard a lot of that happening in most places, but everything is freaking crazy. And if I'm giving any advice, if people want to entertain my advice of any kind, for whatever reason, hypothetically, for the sake of entertainment, for no reason at all, I really think a lot of people, if you have the capability and any interest whatsoever, should look into the possibility of getting a camper van and van life. If that remotely sounds like something you would want to research and see what it's like, uh, most major cities in America have a rental crisis, and it's getting much worse. And the proposed solutions are stupid. And I've been in that industry, and it's a disaster. And when I get this van, my house will be on wheels. And if you can work it right and you can take on the responsibility and the freaking craziness of it, you become a stronger, more capable person. And when you're all through the storms, you really do have a house on wheels. It's not impossible. A lot of people do this. And I think that's a real big growing trend for people to manage and deal with these problems. Like, you don't want to stay in Seattle. I don't want to stay in Minneapolis. And now I'm going to have a camper van. That's a solution.
Well,
And if the shit hits the fan, I'll take my van out into the woods somewhere and get myself some chickens or something.
what's your plan after you get it back to Minneapolis? Because that'd be
Yeah.
about the summer.
Yeah. For 3 weeks. So I'm moving to a new apartment with a good friend of mine. And for 3 weeks, I got to park it. And that's not going to be too big a deal. I know, kind of got that figured out. And then I get a free parking space at my new place. And that's really nice. And we're going to fix it up over the warm season. It's got a couple of issues. But honestly, it's like in really good condition. All factors considered, it's much more doable than it's about 20 years old, which is really that's the sweet spot for price and value and quality. You really want to look for vans that are right around the turn of the century at this point. If you can get a van that's from this century for less than $10,000, if it's a class C or maybe a class B, then that's freaking amazing in my research so far. But we're just going to fix it up, take it one step at a time. And then once I get myself to a good position where I feel like I can work less at a regular job and have more time on my hands and maybe dabble in self-employment or have extra time, I can pick a road trip and I can travel. Do you know how cool it would be if me and you could figure out how to manage like travel in a camper van, and I can just film it and like talk to people and meet people and say, here's what the experience is, then all these people that are trying to figure out what the hell is going on could watch those videos and get like a more personal experience of what it's like. And then it would just be so cool.
If there's anybody that wants to, we're at the audience part. If there's anybody that wants to, well, we have one viewer today. So if you want to come on and join us, just type something in the comments. And anyone else that might be listening, just email us at jeffandnemo@gmail.com.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I guess we'll keep talking.
Yeah. Jeff, you talked about a friend of yours had contemplated you two traveling around and talking to people, but it seems like you don't even know what's going on with that. If you had an opportunity come up, would you, for anything, would you kind of be interested in that kind of thing? Or do you know what you're going to do trying to leave Seattle or?
No, I'm completely open. I thought about even like renting a car myself and just bopping around wherever. There's many people I could visit or meet along many different routes. So I thought even something like that, but it's been so long since I've been on the road like that on my own. Um, I don't know. I could fly
Yeah.
anywhere potentially. I'm kind of open. Like I just got my vaccine, my last shot 2 weeks ago, so I'm vaccinated. I'm free. I'm 2 weeks out from the last shot, so I feel like I'm not trapped in the apartment anymore. I can do some traveling. I can go hiking if I want. I can go camping. I can get a car and drive around. Um,
Yeah.
I can fly. I haven't flown in over a year. I feel comfortable getting on a plane now. So this opens up many, many possibilities, and I've only just now started to dip my toe in and see.
Yeah. Yeah, we're still in this phase where it's just all possibilities, and there's some challenge, there's just some excitement with it, and then there's some challenges. And I think
Yeah,
for me and you, biggest frustration or one of them is just the when things feel slow, and it's like it feels like it's within reach, but I can't grasp it. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, one of the nice things, ever since last August when I was ostracized from my old youth network for that job, there's been a lot of situations I find where it helps me realize who my really good, true, lifelong friends are. And I basically consider them my family now. And I've it's extremely lucky. And I know there's a lot of people that deal with isolation to an extreme, and I actually have struggled with that myself. Of just I'm such a social, proactive person, but it's like nothing ever sticks. Relationships seem hard to last or maintain. And
mhm.
something I'm figuring out with like in comparison to my closest friends is like something that really it's like it tests the friendship and it strengthens it. And it's when you have something that's serious and impacting and it requires responsibility, whether it's a disaster or it's maybe a good thing or it's just like a challenge. It's like you got to climb a mountain. If it really, it's like life is pointing the finger at you and saying, step up and take care of this shit and like get on top of it. And that's when you see people's, true colors are those situations. And you see what they're capable of and you see what they're willing to do. And you see their natural disposition. You see what they're like when they're at their worst. And everybody's got that unique flavor of what happens in those situations, like how they react. And it's shown me who my closest friends are. It shows me their strengths and weaknesses, and it literally strengthens the friendship and we bond over it. It's like if you meet two guys that went to freaking war together, that friendship is unbreakable no matter what. And it occurs to me, I already kind of knew this, but I'm specifying more clearly. I can like feel it, that in modern times, if people don't have those challenges and those crazy struggles the same way, and there's this idea of life being easier, whether you experience it yourself or you see someone else experience this easier life, it seems like it makes people devalue friendships. Like, I've had roommates abandon the house that have the money to just go spend on other housing and pay double rent or pay fines, or they don't care about their rental history. They literally just don't care. And then they just ruin the friendship by abandoning the house. It's like, oh, I have the money to spend. So who cares about this relationship that money can't repair? And it seems like people, they devalue those relationships. And I'm very fortunate that a few good people are really get it, that there's things with relationships that take time and effort to build that is unique and irreplaceable.
Yes, I would agree.
How's your situation with relationships? Because like since we started this podcast, seems like you've had some bad situations.
Yeah, this is a topic that keeps coming up on all my Zooms, and I keep trying to avoid it.
Oh,
No, I've had some bad experience recently around relationships, friendships specifically, and I'm not sure if it's doing the podcast exactly or something they heard on a podcast or something I may have posted on social media, like an article, but it's something in that category that people are reacting to. But it's not any specific interaction that's happened between us, but it whatever. There's something about what I've started doing recently around social justice that's causing reactions in relationships that are changing the relationships, and I wasn't prepared for that. I was prepared for it with some people and maybe strangers and acquaintances, but I wasn't prepared for it from other people that were a little more what you just described relationships being. And that's where a lot of it's coming from. And so I'm very up in the air about what relationships are, because I thought I had a pretty good grasp until now. And then this weird reaction that people are having to my involvement in my opposition to wokeness are causing all of that to come into question. So now that's part of the disorientation I'm feeling, is I don't know who to trust. I don't know what relationships are anymore. I don't know what healthy is or are functional versus what's it just totally has me questioning and reconfiguring that in my mind now as a result of these experiences. And relationships is a core experience for me that's being I have to kind of reprocess now, because a lot of relationships that I thought were strong are being impacted by wokeness, I guess, or by what I'm doing in reaction to wokeness. And so I don't know, I'm rambling right now, but anyway, that's the answer to your question. Is
yeah.
it's I'm
It's
having a lot of difficulty around relationships lately, and figuring out what they
it's
are and how to evaluate the strength of them.
yeah, it's brutal. I remember being in the aftermath of any of my situations where everything's just fallen apart, and it's tough. Sometimes it's more difficult to be stuck in limbo. It's like now you're not even defined. So it's like it's almost like things are frozen in time and they started to fall apart and fray at the edges, but they haven't really fallen apart. And so it's not concrete at all. And it makes it hard to choose what fork in the road, even because it's like, what if the paths keep shifting and changing their shape? How do you choose a fork in the road then? Whereas if things really fall apart, that has its own brutality to it, but it's also remarkably concrete. Like you hit the ground really hard. And that's what happened in my situation last August. As soon as my video went public, it was like a switch flipped and everyone stopped talking to me. And that included those couple of people that I thought were really close with me and some of the people like closest to me in my entire life. But and I think that that weird paradox is very almost identical to what you're describing. And I have to say that at a certain point, my understanding of those situations happening where everything seems like this person is fundamentally close to you and they would not ruin the friendship, and then they do because of social justice or something else that just fundamentally breaks. And I think it is the reality of this is that everyone has their breaking point and everyone has some particular ways that they may be vulnerable to a social contagion, and it can be really unexpected, and that it's just it's almost like it's inherently baffling. I had a really close friend for over a decade that I lost, kind of unrelated to social justice, that dabbled a little bit, but we lived together, and then he abandoned the house, and there was terrible things happening around us at the same time leading up to it. And instead of using it as a reason to step up and say, we need to support each other, we're in this boat and storm together, he used it as a reason to completely just leave the house at like the worst time possible, when my health was terrible and one of our friends just died. So that was like one of those situations where it's like, how is it that this relationship seemed to be as strong as it possibly could, and then this person ended the friendship? It's terrible, but and it took me so long to articulate why that happens. And I really think that no matter how strong a relationship is, there is a possibility that things can break. And I think the main explanation I have for it is compartmentalization, that people can be strong and predictable or reliable in certain ways and just terrible in other ways. And you have to see that those two are like different categories. And if we're in a social contagion with social justice, then it seems like a lot of people could be vulnerable to that. And it's really shocking.
Well, I'm looking at the comments, so we have a few more viewers.
Yay.
So if anybody wants to interact, we have the flat ass, pissed off, not brainwashed student. If anybody wants to ask questions or interact or come on the Zoom and join the conversation. Oh, we have Neil.
Hi,
To
Neil.
what extent do you think people value relationships that serve them, and that social justice challenges that service to them? That's a good question. I try to be that cynical as much as I can, but I'm so bad at it.
Yeah, people can. I think that there's a basic component of being a human being that's selfish by nature. And the way we use the word selfish often is inherently negative, and I don't like that. I think that selfishness is a trait or an observation, and it can have positive, neutral, or negative impacts, but that it's an inherent trait. If you're an individual, usually that means you have a self-identity of some kind. So people are selfishly interested because they need to survive and live a good life. But sometimes those instincts get warped and they come out in bad ways, or things just get all screwed up. It's so hilarious to me. The people I meet that want to be selfless tend to manifest their selfishness in the worst ways possible. Because if you try to get rid of the self, you end up just becoming self-hating. And that's like, how you treat yourself is how you treat others. So that's kind of what I muse on based on Neil's question there. It's a really good one.
And as a follow-up, I mean that if the relationship doesn't feel like it can serve them anymore because of some perceived threat, and
yeah, people are survivalistic at times. I could see it being a real thing, that there are people that maybe are ambivalent to social justice and they just want to coexist, and they want their relationships to be free of friction, and maybe they're highly agreeable. And so even if they want to accept people who aren't woke, if there's this pressure, those people will cave. Maybe, and it can be a psychological thing. I can definitely see, like, I had a dark period when a couple months into starting my youth job, where like I just felt this physical darkness of, oh my God, I'm coexisting in this terrible environment where every time I walk into the room, they deliberately see me as this villain, and they're required to. So some people, I think they just don't want to face that darkness, maybe. And I'm sure they react without necessarily thinking about it as much, and it's just a reaction. Ooh, something happening?
Neil may come on and join us. Neil Barnes, who's also going to be our guest next week from the
Yep.
UK, and he was a previous guest, so he's kind of a core part of the community so far.
Yeah, Neil's great. I highly recommend Neil for all the great things Neil does. He's kind of our in-house British person.
There he
for
is.
all of the Britishness, all the British things. But yeah, Jeff, we getting any other comments or anything interesting?
Yay. We have Neil. Well, we do now. We have Neil. We'll get
Yeah.
something from him, I'm sure. Let me check the comments.
Neil, why don't you mute the YouTube link?
Oh my god, I'm coexisting.
Yeah, I agree with Emma Louie.
Terrible environment where every time I walk into the room, they
So
deliberately
Mao brainwashing, and then you know what is going on. So Neil, how do we have you connected?
Yeah, he had our show on and it was delayed, so it was really jarring. He was listening to me say something like 2 minutes ago. Neil, you made it.
Yeah, I was just having a problem with my speaker, so I realized I was listening to the YouTube, which was like a few seconds of lag. But
I
was just thanks for letting me join. I was just really interested in what you're saying there about how relationships that feel really strong and secure and cemented can kind of dissolve, and how that something within society or politics somehow initiates that dissolving. And one of the comments in the Emma made was about kind of like if you look at sort of Soviet and Maoist brainwashing, there is techniques within those sort of social politics which put an enormous amount of pressure on people, and then there's something about us as people, that responds to that, which I think what Nemo you were saying about what happens within the person that responds to that sort of pressure. So it's a combination of those two things, something inherent with us, maybe slightly self-serving about relationships, and then a particular strategic approach to almost forcing people into how they select relationships, or what relationships are safe to have. And I was just thinking about that and wondering whether how well we as individuals determine what's best for us. Like, I personally feel that no matter how much pressure society would put on me about who I can and can't be friends with, my response is, I don't care what you say, what feels right to me internally. But I mean, that's just what I can say, that from this position, no problem. If I was living in the Soviet Union, that might not be the case. I may fold under pressure, but certainly like the pressure that social justice puts on people to make a choice, to pick a side, and to reevaluate relationships based on that lens. Like, I haven't succumbed to that, but I can see that many people have, and it's very divisive. It kind of splits people up, but for me, that speaks to the people that I feel succumb to that pressure, put too much emphasis on their identity being validated by others. And I think I'm relatively, I don't know if selfish is the right word, but I feel like I validate my own identity. If I'm happy with who I am, that's good enough for me. And if you don't like it, that's your problem. Like, it's not really my problem. But for many people, particularly people that may be slightly extroverted, the importance of how others see them can be a very powerful influence.
Yes, I could see the sensitivity of a person's experience of selfishness, and say how they might care for others if they're in a caretaking role, things like that. There's a real sensitivity, to that experience. That I have definitely met a lot of people who seem to resist anything they think is selfish. Their perception of selfishness, they resist it like oil to water. They never want to have anything to do with it. They're like desperate to be these selfless, caring, altruistic people. And it's almost like they're making a caricature of what it means to be a human. And I'm guessing I've based on like imagining some of the people where I've seen this play out, it really seems like the selfish part of them is buried until it explodes. So they just turn themselves into a landmine, and it's this forcing yourself to do something until you rebel. And so it's almost like it's the parent-child relationship where it's an authoritarian parent, but you've like internalized it. And so now you have this authoritarian parent, and it's trying to, that side of you is trying to make you be selfless, which is a caricature. And then the child in you, or the person that wants to be free, rebels against that, and then you're just an unreliable person. It's like, and at a certain point, it just breaks a person. Most of the people I've met that have those kind of unexpected breakdowns and do that, it's almost like it's almost like I'm watching them throw up this poison of forced selflessness. And maybe we can understand it better if we try to see the signs of that forced selflessness sooner. I don't know, Jeff. I mean, do you have any experience with that, or Neil, where like you see people, like a person that seems to be very selfless, altruistic, kind of to an extreme?
Yeah, I think when I do see people like that, my gut feeling is that they're trying to score points. That it doesn't quite resonate as realistic to me, because to some degree, we have to remain selfish to survive. And that doesn't have to be a negative selfishness, but okay, to put it another way, for us to continue our existence as an individual, we need to take care of ourselves. We need to value ourselves enough to survive on a day-to-day basis, and we need to treat ourselves with some degree. We need to give ourselves enough importance and value that we look after ourselves physically, mentally, that we remain healthy and we continue. Anyone that's entirely altruistic or presents themselves as very altruistic and that's always about everybody else, I mean, to some degree that could be a defense mechanism, a survival technique, which is incorporated from childhood. If you grow up if your parental relationship requires you to serve your parents in order for survival, then I can understand how that happens. But I find that that most people that present that way are disingenuous. It's not they're doing it for a reason, and that reason isn't as purely altruistic as presented. So it's a bit fake, basically. There's a certain fakeness to it, because anyone that's really honest will put themselves quite high up in the value ranking of people, right? Because like the way I look at it is that if I do want to serve others, if I do want to be of care and use to the people I love, then I need to be healthy and I need to take care of myself, because if I'm weak and broken, then what good am I to anyone that around me? If my mum's sick and I want to look after her, then I need to be healthy. It's no good if I'm even worse off. So these sort of I'm just all about looking after everyone else and making sure society functions. And I'm not buying it. Like it smells of BS. So and I think you see that collapse in personal relationships at some point.
Yes, I amen to that. That reminds me very strongly of Jordan Peterson's second rule from 12 Rules for Life. Treat yourself as someone you're responsible for caring for, something like that. Basically it. Yeah, that's pretty much how I feel about it. That even if I want to put other people above myself, to do that, I have to put myself first in a way that allows me to. It's almost like a psychological oxymoron, or just like a weird thing with language where you try to represent your desire to care for other people. And it's like the phrase, I'm putting myself first before everyone else. That phrase sounds like you're high and mighty and you're very selfish and I'm just going to care for myself and hoard everything and all the gold. But I don't think that's true. I think it's just a practical, literal thing that no matter what you do, it starts with you. Like the phrase that people use, you're not the center of the universe. You might as well assume you are the center of your universe, because you can't get out of your body as long as you're alive. You're always moving in the center of your body, and then everything is out from there. I'm in my body, I'm in my house, I'm in this place, and my physical place I'm in is the center of it. It's a geographical reality. I'm sure people mean things metaphorically, but you can literally assume you're the center of the universe from your experience, and you have to function based on that reality, even if you want to care for other people. Jeff, are you seeing comments? Or are you thinking about anything? Otherwise,
Nope, we
Neil.
have Emma Louie commenting still.
Cool. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Anybody in the comments, and Neil. Neil's in the UK, so it's kind of late at night for him, but he's a trooper.
And whoa,
Yeah.
we're doing the show, what, 2 hours earlier next week?
Yeah.
So we'll be starting
this
at
is-
11:30 Pacific and 1:30 Central next week.
Yeah, and it's on Sunday. It's a little weird. We had to shift
Oh,
it
we're
around.
doing it on Sunday.
Do you
And 2
remember
hours
that?
early.
Yeah, because I am driving my camper van with my friend across the United States from Georgia to Minnesota. So I'll still be driving on Saturday.
Right.
So next week's episode is Sunday. It's Pacific time, 11:30 to 1:30. Okay, yeah, Pacific time. That's Jeff. Is 1:30 to 3 p.m. Central time is my time. Is
11:30.
Dang it! This is so confusing. Too many time zones. Jeff, you know exactly what it is?
Next week only, because it's 2 hours early, right? Is going to be 11:30 Pacific, which is West Coast time, which is my time. It'll be 1:30 Central time, which is Nemo, which is 2:30 East Coast. And then Neil, I think it's
7:30.
7 p.m. 7:30 p.m. your time.
Yes.
Yeah, 7:30 p.m.
Yep.
UK time. Yeah.
Yeah, time zones. That's what happens when you're doing international stuff. Time zones get crazy. Okay, and that's on Sunday next week, not Saturday. But anyways, yeah, Neil, anything else kind of standing out to you in our conversation?
I think one thing that comes to mind is that this is happening for a lot of people. Right? There's a lot of people whose relationships are breaking down due to divisiveness, essentially. And it's happening at quite a rapid rate across the United States and now in the UK as well. And part of me feels like this is strategic, in that, okay, let's just start with just the US. We'll forget about the UK for now, but the culture of the US has for a very long time been very strong, and there's been some really key values in American culture. One was a certain amount of religious value. Whether you agree with it or not, it's not really the point, just the fact that there was a set of ethics or values that existed within America based around religion. Then on top of that, family seems to be a very strong culture in the US. There's, in my mind, quite a healthy nationalism about being American. and that's something that people from all sorts of backgrounds could rally around. Maybe not everybody, but it was very open and very broad. And from an outsider's perspective, like there's this kind of like can-do attitude about America that as Europeans, we tend to just like go, where's that coming from? Like, but it's like the new world, right? So it's just like, yeah, we can do it. Like, you know, the gold rush hasn't ever stopped. And so that in essence has led America to become one of the most powerful economic and culturally influential countries in the history of the world in a very short period of time. And those things that I just mentioned, religion, family, national identity, they're all quite relational. Like there's something that's shared across people and people can get behind as a shared value. And what appears to be happening now, the chaos in the new world, so to speak, is that these values have been attacked or undermined. So I think religion is probably, and if you were to, the most recent surveys in the US around whether people consider themselves religious or not is probably the lowest it's ever been in history of the country. And religion is generally associated with political conservatism, at least Christianity seems to be. Family, which has always been a strong unit of relationship in the US, seems to be breaking down. And I say that, and it's mainly anecdotal evidence, but it's the fact that I read so frequently that people are accusing their own family members of being either racist or sexist or something else. But that social justice has become a division within family. And now you're talking about friendships also dissolving through the same thing. Like it's obvious to anybody that if you look at the media, that art and culture and entertainment has been really damaged, like really severely affected. So this feels strategic. It feels like an attack on culture and on values. And I think for people that need the validation of others, people are picking sides. And so I think it becomes quite scary for people to be on the wrong side of something that is so divisive. Like, I don't feel you have to pick a side actually, but I think most
that's
people
what I
do.
was thinking. There's not a side. I don't see the sides to pick.
No.
Just like with religion or I don't know, other affinities. There's many different religion dominations. I don't feel like I have to pick a religion, pick a side in the religious sphere. And I feel the same way about this. I don't. If they're seeing it at that point, they're at a point that I'm not at yet, which is that we're in conflict or opposition, and it's time to pick sides. And I hope we're not there yet. I'm not there in my mind.
Yeah, I see a lot of people where they don't necessarily see it as picking sides, but as social justice is dominant. And then to the point that they don't even think about it. It's really weird. It's like people build that I've been around in social justice pockets, which it's dominating in the Twin Cities, but like really being in those groups, I just see people's interactions. And like, I guess to some extent they may think about picking sides, but even that is pretty far removed from what's at the forefront of their thinking, and their social perception is just this weird knee-jerk reaction they train themselves to have of reinforcing that we all believe the same thing. There's just this strange social like body language even in my old network where somebody would make a comment in the flow of their conversation. It's like you could count the comments. There's a comment, and then they just kind of nod and they reaffirm each other both agree with that. And there's like this weird desperation for people to confirm that they're all the same. And I think it's because their belief system is so cultish and so desperate that they're destroying the ground beneath them for any kind of social security of any kind, social reassurance of any kind, any authenticity in that ground. And when you're losing that ground and you're in an unhealthy place, you tend to become controlling. You can even think of it literally. If you are about to fall off a cliff, you grasp. Looks like we got another person joining us.
Hello.
We have
Can you hear me?
Justin.
Justin, glad
Hey.
you joined us, man. I've talked to you on
How you doing?
CTA a little bit.
Yeah, I missed a couple of the Wednesday meetings. I'm here. How you doing?
Well, we talked about it today. We're gonna try to find additional opportunities for people to interact and keep some kind of community going.
Mm.
Yeah. Justin, is there anything on your mind? Anything in
Yeah.
particular?
Neil mentioned something about relationships, and you guys seem to kind of be talking about relationships when I first tuned in. And this is something that I've been thinking about for a couple months now. So the world is actually a pretty good place to live right now, right? Comparative to any other period in history. We admire and talk about the Roman Empire and its feats of engineering and all this stuff, and the early emergence of science in the ancient Greece. But at the end of the day, these were still times in history where you could die by cutting your foot on a stone, right? And nowadays that's probably not going to happen to you, especially if you live in the so-called first world. We have unimaginable amounts of material wealth and medical technology. People are expected to live into their 80s in the United States, and this is just incredible. We're basically eliminating absolute poverty, and connecting people to electricity and the internet at just astonishing rates. And there's less war than there hasn't been a major conflict, like real big conflict, in decades. Like there's Vietnam, that wasn't too bad compared to like the world wars. There's a lot of small conflicts, but they tend to be pretty focused, and there's not as much collateral damage as there has been historically. And soldiers aren't dying. Soldiers are dying more from enemy fire than they're dying from disease now, which historically wasn't the case. But at the same time, we kind of find ourselves in kind of this spiritual vacuum. It seems how on the one hand, we have everything we could ever want, but then at the same time, we're kind of all experiencing this kind of inner void from like lack of struggle in our lives and this kind of lack of real connection. So even though life throughout human history has been quite difficult and hard, that kind of promoted the formation of these strong, tight-knit communities. So people would be born, raised, and die pretty much in the same small geographical area, but they knew all their cousins and uncles. Grandparents lived, if not in the same house, but very close. People died in the familial home, surrounded by their family. And now it just seems like people are kind of disposable. Relationships are disposable. People die kind of off in the background in hospice care or in hospitals. So while we've satisfied our material needs, it seems like we've kind of done so at the cost of something that might be even a little bit more important, which is this very deeply felt human need for other people, and for other people to be important and meaningful in our lives, and to not be like disposable. I don't know what your guys' thoughts might be on that. Bit of a rant.
I
That's
think you
beautiful.
mentioned something really important there. I hadn't ever really thought about it, but as you said it, that the disposableness of connection. So going back historically, the importance of connection to survival, but then beyond survival to meaning. And so how relationship and the sense of love, connection, and meaning in the world was very much dependent upon the relationships of those that are close to you. And those people would either be familial, as in family, or slightly beyond that, your localized community, to which connection is based upon knowing one another and supporting and caring for one another in a very real sense, like working with one another, keeping each other alive. And you're right that now in the modern era, particularly in the more developed countries, your capacities to survive and even thrive doesn't really require any specific relationships, not in a material sense. And we have become much more material. And I don't mean materialistic in a type of consumerism way, although that is also true, but I mean material as in attaching our survival to objective reality of just housing, money, clothing, food, rather than connection, something internally valuable, such as love, friendship, family, being seen, being known, being valued as a human being by somebody else, and self-value that comes from that. I feel there's a loss of self-value as well in the modern world. So I think that you've brought up something really important there.
Yeah. I mean, just imagine if the four of us were in person doing this. I was almost just contemplating the physical experience being different with some of the modern ways that people get disconnected. And technology facilitates social interaction to an unimaginable level, yet also we can stay stuck and disconnected. I think there's a lot of people that perhaps just don't think about it too much and subconsciously or maybe a little mindlessly just let technology replace their in-person interaction. And that's on top of some of the driving forces that Justin, that you described. I definitely see that. And as you two were both talking just now, I started to kind of shift my perception and see what happens if I just feel more physically connected. Because like, what am I doing? I'm talking in front of a camera. And so it's like this weird disconnect where it's almost like it's not personal to do these remote things. And the most personal you can do on the internet usually is video. So in shifting that perception, I actually started to feel like this was way more personal because now I was more conscious of it. That like the four of us are in some ways four random people that have just happened to meet each other. And each of us has like a whole life history and our daily personal experiences in a physical location. It is fundamentally personal. And it seems like there's the 24 ways that people get disconnected and it surrounds them. And next thing you know, they're cut off because it's happening from so many angles, economically, technology, psychology, you name it.
Yeah.
There's something also like, sorry, did you want to speak, Justin?
No, I'm okay. I was just saying, yeah.
Okay, I was just going to say, like, when you mentioned about disposability of relationships, and then I'm just thinking about what Nemo just said about how we're using social media for you know, like you could say random people or people that none of us have ever met in person. So in some way, there's almost like an infinite number of relationships that I might be able to establish through the internet or through the technology that allows transatlantic connection in a virtual sense. Right? So in some ways, relationships can become more one of the sort of maybe the effects of social media and digital connection, is that relationships can become more disposable because they're also replaceable. So if this wasn't working for me, I could like log off and then maybe go join some other chat room, or go and connect with a bunch of other people that I don't really know either. And for this immediate space of time, I can feel connected to people, and then tomorrow I could be connected to someone else, and so on and so forth. But what you were describing earlier, Justin, the physically located relationship, and I couldn't just like, get rid of everyone in the town or in the village. If I did, that would either be mass murder or me leaving. It's one of those two options, right?
You have to learn how to get along.
Ruling out mass murder. If I leave the village, I might not even make it to the next one. I might just get killed by a pack of wolves before I get there. And providing I do get there, I might not be trusted or accepted anyway.
Right.
So the importance of those people around me in that physical location is really high. And so I think that importance also drives the not only the need for a meaningful connection, but actually it's not just a drive for a meaningful connection, but actually provides the meaning of the connection, as in my sense of self and livelihood and self-esteem and survival is deeply rooted in my connection to others. And if my connection to, let's say, to you, Justin, and to you, Nemo, and you, Jeff, let's say we all lived in the same village or same town, right? Our connections would probably be morally or deeper, I would say. I think there'd be some kind of real value in knowing one another. And it's not disposable. And if I was to dispose of those friendships or those connections, I'd be disposing of part of myself, fundamentally, part that keeps me alive and healthy. Whereas in the modern age, I can, I hope to think that this would never happen, but I could effectively end these relationships right here, right now, and just replace them. So
there's an old expression, 2 heads are better than one. And to kind of springboard off that expression, this is another idea that I've been kind of pondering for a while. How much of our mental health and our function, functionality, ability to take care of ourselves and just be healthy, functioning people, how much of that is outsourced to other people? Right? Because if you think I'm living in a small village, I don't really have the option to leave. I'm stuck here, right? And this is kind of what a marriage used to be. I kind of have to learn how to get along with the other people here, because I can't just leave and, burn the bridges and build new ones. And maybe learning how to get along with the other people might actually even be good for me. Because let's say, for example, maybe I'm a little bit lazy, right? And maybe it's better not to be lazy. And the people around me are kind of unhappy with the fact that I'm a little bit lazy, and they say something, or they make jokes, or they complain or something. And if I'm somewhat aware and intelligent, I might think to myself, maybe I should work on that so I can get along with everyone else better. But then there's a benefit to myself in that I'm less lazy. I get the work done that I need to do done, on time, right? Or maybe I'm an angry person and people don't really like that. So then I have to kind of reflect and work on the fact that I'm an angry person in order to get along with everyone else. And so I improve my anger management skills. And then when I'm mad at my tool, I don't break it, right? And that's a benefit. So it's these little things that you don't really, these unexpected benefits, and they're small. And one thing that I've read a lot on the internet, and I've seen on YouTube videos, is there's all these introverts and I'm an introverted person too, so like I understand, I get it. But they're saying things like, I'm so happy about COVID, everything's moved to virtual and I don't have to leave the house, I don't have to deal with other people. And I'm like, yeah, okay, that's a short-term benefit, but like maybe it's actually good for you to have to deal with other people, even though you're like an introvert and you have a little bit of social anxiety. Like maybe there's something long-term and deeply profound that you're actually like sacrificing, as a result of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, Justin, I want to hop on that contemplating because I had a realization while you're describing that, getting over anger management and not breaking your tools or taking it out on other people in your village. And it's almost like two experiences have been flipped or subverted. And like, as an example, if I dedicated a lot of my time to, and my efforts and my existing skillfulness, etc., to coexisting in a really, really hardcore social justice environment last year, from 2019 into 2020. So like for a whole year, I was coexisting. And once it blew up, it suggested very heavily that all of my intensive efforts that were just so much more than they would normally be to coexist in a cult were not worth it. And so we have this, it seems like we have this subversion of the usual trade-offs, cost and benefit, and that now to some degree, and at least at face value in the short term, it's more obvious. A lot of people, they seem to get more benefits from self-isolating or just not putting in effort in relationships. And I'm sure I'm far from the only one that's been ostracized after putting in a crazy amount of effort. So for the people that do put in the effort and they try to build those lasting relationships, if they're getting sabotaged, if it's not working or they can't even get started, then the ability to find an opportunity to invest in a community seems to be less common now. It seems to be, it's almost rare. It's such a gamble. It's so crazy. Like I moved across the country in 2016 and I joined the Free State Project in New Hampshire. And that was like this real ragtag, kind of random, chaotic group of self-described anarchists and libertarians that want to be off grid. And there was some really great opportunities there. And frankly, a lot of them were squandered because people were struggling so much, and the burdens on them made them react in ways that were very dysfunctional for those around them. So fundamentally, those communities aren't making it in the modern world. And we may have a lot of, it may be too more complicated and counterintuitive. And we're just dealing with all of that. And we don't even know how to resolve it.
What comes up for me is I'm kind of thinking about the Elon Musk dream of moving to Mars. And just thinking, and this probably sounds like I'm coming at it from quite a different angle, but in order for that to work, to move into an entirely new environment where there are no existing resources, at least of a sort of humankind that you can defer to if it's not working out. In a way, you could go back to very like prehistory times of just exploring new territory. You have to be able to depend upon one another, and you have to be able to collaborate. It's a survival must. And so Nemo, you was just speaking about sort of new communities, but there being some sort of relational dysfunction or individual dysfunction which led to sort of a difficulty in cooperation over a shared goal. Well, the closer that shared goal moves towards survival, the more important or necessary collaboration becomes, and the more necessary that collaboration becomes, I think the more able we are to put aside difference, or even, you know, as Justin was saying, readjust and reflect upon ourselves to become more cooperative or functional as a member of a group. So in some ways, this kind of circles back to what Justin was saying earlier as well, that our ability to work together, it feels quite connected to our survival, and that the more chance we have of surviving without cooperation, the less important cooperation becomes, and the less important cooperation becomes, the less self-reflection we are forced into doing. So then it becomes down to kind of like choice. Do you choose to be a self-reflective person? Do you choose to develop yourself? I mean, the fact that there are thousands and thousands of books about self-development, which were highly unnecessary 1,000 years ago, right? You didn't need to self-develop. You either did self-develop or you didn't exist. Like, you know, you either learn to cooperate or you're effed. Whereas now we kind of like have to be encouraged to develop ourselves enough to be able to talk to our neighbors, like, and I think it was like Simon Sinek that said something along the lines of, there's thousands of books on self-development, but there's very few books on how to develop relationships, like how to work with those around us, or how to care. There's lots of books on self-care, but there's very few books on how to care for one another.
That reminds me of a line from Fight Club. I'm not going to repeat it on air, but it was the line about what self-improvement is. And I think you've made a really good point there. Like, self-improvement, like, yeah, it's good, but it's very self-referential. It's all the self. You're just doing it yourself, versus having a relationship, cooperative relationship with someone else, where you're both improving each other a little bit over time. Seems more, it's like more, something about it just seems more meaningful.
Yeah. This is reminding me of some of the experiences I've had and some of the research I'm working on now that I've had seen the good, the bad, and the ugly in a lot of the community-facing nonprofits. And I think there's some of this, there are patterns that are common in major cities in the US, and there may be some psychology that's even more universal. Some of it's very specific to me, but just as an example, you know, if we're talking about the importance of relationships, in a lot of the work I did facing homeless issues, mobile outreach, youth-specific empowerment, we were actually discouraged from relationship developing. And a lot of it was tied to the idea that you have to set boundaries as a professional. And there's certain basic things where you set boundaries, but you do that in all relationships. And so their way of going about this was contradictory. It almost made it sound like they didn't want you to have relationships, and that's what boundaries are. But that sees contradictory and impossible. If there's no relationship, that's like not existing. It's almost like being non-existent. And part of the philosophy that I'm developing with self-determination theory, and something I call intrinsic abundance, is to look at self-determination as a fundamental, true form of wealth. And relationships are one of the 3 fundamental factors in self-determination. The other 2 are competence and autonomy. And so I've been writing about this, and say you have a church that gives out the free meal, they're focused on a material need. And that's how they build a relationship, is based on this material need. But a lot of times they'll line up the volunteers. Here's what you do. They don't really interact very much at all. The volunteers don't even meet the people eating the food. And the only people that eat the food are assumed to be very poor and maybe homeless, and they can't even make themselves a meal or something. But the more profound and remarkable model of that is where anybody can come and get the free meal if they want it. And so the door is wide open. And so it's community members, maybe it's elderly people that can't cook very well for themselves anymore. And there's some people that really need it for whatever reason. It's very open-ended, and you're sitting at the same tables. The volunteers are in the community, and they have free reign to interact with each other. And there's nobody going around with a clipboard in a suit and tie saying, you're not allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do that. Everyone's just socializing as human beings casually, and they're not forced into this weirdly overly professionalized hierarchy that's impersonal. It's like the disease of professionalism has infiltrated our community building efforts. And if I want to be radical and go in the right direction, then I'm going to make sure that I'm being, as I am, authentic, and I'm ignoring those little rule books, and I'm just going to try to build a genuine connection with the person in front of me and not care about this stupid hierarchies that people are forcing.
Sounds good to me. Jay, it was great to see you on the podcast today. Will you come back and be a guest?
You don't have to answer us on air if you feel pressure.
Yeah, we'll talk social media.
I mean, Neil just kidnapped me and just like, come on. I'm like, okay.
Well, Neil, you'll have to kidnap you again for a full episode. Neil, it's always great to see you, and we'll be seeing you next week.
Yeah,
next Sunday.
I'm happy to be a full guest next week. So Justin, if you want to jump in next week, come and join.
Yeah, there's room. We could do it. Have the both of you.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, as per usual, to our random 2 or 3 audience members, you can contact us at jeffandnemo@gmail.com for anything podcast related. If maybe you want to be a guest, or if you want to just talk and see what community building stuff we're doing. And we got a lot of groups we mention all the time. You can join Counterweight at counterweightsupport.com, or you can even just comment and we'll try to get back to you. We're not very well known, so anytime you get a comment, you'll get special treatment, all the attention.
That is true. Yes.
Thanks for both of you guys for coming on. This ended up being a fantastic episode. And Jeff, you got anything else you want to throw out there? Or?
Not that I can think of. We have the Discord that I think is becoming a little more active. So if you want the link to that, you can email us. We still have our weekly Zoom meetings on Wednesdays at 11 a.m. Pacific time. That's pretty much it for now. I guess the next one Sunday is going to be on the road or not on the road, because we're doing it Sunday.
Back. Yeah, okay. I'll be back by Sunday. Next Sunday, May 9th, 1:30 to 3 p.m. Central Time. UK, it's 7:30 to 9 p.m. And Seattle, where Jeff is, Pacific, it's 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. Did I finally get it right?
What is that one?
Pacific is 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. next Sunday for our show.
Podcast. Yeah, it'll be 11:30 Pacific.
Yeah. Okay.
But also, we talked about Tuesday. I think this Tuesday, right?
Yeah.
At 10 a.m. Pacific, which is noon Central Time, me, you, and Neil are going to be on the Discord server doing a live chat for an hour or two. So if you want to join us on Discord, we're going to be interacting live on Tuesday.
Yeah. And anybody can join us. We really want to keep this accessible and interactive. It's so much more fun. And it's the personalizing it, making it more personal and not just all about becoming famous or publicity or whatever crap that's less personal. But anyways,
Yeah, I don't want to
Neil,
be famous.
Justin,
What?
what do you say, Justin?
I don't want to be famous. I'm happy just being in the
Oh,
background.
I don't think you have anything to worry about that there.
Justin,
But we
you're
are trying to
hiding
build
your
community.
beard.
This podcast is part of a larger project on building community. So we're trying to find and create more opportunities for that community to happen. So Tuesday we're going to show up on Discord and hopefully lead something there. And then people have been hanging out on the back porch more. We're doing gaming and online gaming. We watch movies, videos, share music. So there's some community happening there too from the other groups.
Yeah. All right, guys. Neil, Justin, you guys have any last words or shout outs you want to throw out there?
No, it was nice to stop in and chat. Interesting conversation.
Yeah, good to see you.
Yes.
I'd like to say to the Grey Defender, like, come and join next week if you're listening, because I thought you had some really great things that you brought up in episode 5, and I was kind of on the verge of linking back to that when we reached the end of this one, so that might be something to do there, but that would be a pleasure. But otherwise, just thank you guys for having this space, and Justin, thanks for being kidnapped and just like or hijacked and just joining in there. That was really cool. So yeah, cheers.
And we have
See you guys
Emma
later.
Louie in the comments. So Emma, thank you as well for participating today. And we'll see everyone next Sunday, 2 hours earlier.
Yes, indeed.
Hey,
All right.
take
Peace,
care.
everyone.